This is Duke University.
I am Susan Harbage Page. I am an artist and I deal with issues in my work, and I teach in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at UNC-Chapel Hill. Since 2007, I've been walking the U.S.-Mexico border, and I go every year to Brownsville, Texas and Matamoros, Mexico to photograph the objects that people leave behind along the border. And I photograph them on site, and then I ship them back to my studio in Chapel Hill. And I have probably over 1,000 objects at this point. And I'm creating an archive. I re-photograph them. I call it the anti-archive, which is sort of an archaeological look at that space. And it's a way of creating history and making meaning out of found objects. That is really a story I think we don't really want to look at. The things that we save are all from people who are rich and famous. But this is another version of history. It's another way to sift our history. And I photographed those objects on bright, colorful backgrounds because I didn't want them to be seen as evidence, but they are this collected archaeology of the border. When I started this, I decided before I even went to the border that I would not photograph people coming north. I just felt like other people were doing that, and a lot of times those photographs are images of immigrant stories that have come to a bad end. And I'm also sort of pushing back against documentary photography in my own way. I also thought these objects held really, really powerful stories of hope and panic and fear. I just wanted to see for myself, quite frankly, what was happening on our borders, because I've had experience with borders, really personal experience, and it's all over the news, and sometimes you just want to go and see for yourself. My mother took me on this camping trip in Europe, and we went to all of the regular sort of tourist sites, but she pushed on, and this was 1969, and we went into the Eastern Bloc countries of Romania and Hungary and Bulgaria. And on one of those borders going into Romania, we were stopped and held. They took every single thing out of our car. They sprayed the bottom of our car off. They didn't speak our language. There were no telephones. It was an outpost. So that moment of sort of crossing 23 borders, not being a part of either side, just being kind of trapped in the middle, was really a powerful moment for me. And I believe it's also a powerful moment for people who are coming north into the United States. I often pull out my UNC faculty ID, quite frankly, when the Border Patrol stops me. And they'll usually leave me alone, and I never walk alone. But I know that it's because I'm white and I'm privileged, and probably because I'm a middle-aged woman, that I can stay in that space safely. So it strikes me really deeply that I use my ID to stay in the same space that other individuals have to throw out their ID to stay. In another way, they reminded me of relics, relics of saints, bits and pieces of people's lives, fragments that really ask a lot of questions, and they ask us to imagine what's happened to these people. I think when you look at a bra that's been cast aside, or someone's toothbrush that has been cast aside by the banks of the Rio Grande, it's going to change you, and you're going to ask a question about why that's there. If you think about, for instance, a toothbrush, it's a sign that someone has been stopped by the Border Patrol because they see that toothbrush as a weapon. Anything short and hard is seen as a weapon. So if you learn how to read those objects that are left behind, I think it can really change what you're thinking about and change the way you see the people that you're living with or the people that are coming north. Years and years ago, I worked with a group of adult ESL learners in Durham, and I realized how difficult it is to come here and work and not know how to ask off and try to get health care for your kids. And who wants to learn English, you know, when you come home from working 10 hours? I'm really interested in that space as it pertains to North Carolina because we have the fastest growing Latino immigrant population in the United States. Yet, we are 26 hours by car from the border to the closest point on the border, which is where I work. And I think it's an imaginary space in people's minds. Most people don't ever go there. They don't ever cross that bridge. They don't ever cross the river. So part of my intent is to just make it visible. You know, it's a different history than I have. Recently I did a project where I took my mother's teacups from England, where my ancestors are from. She carried them from England to Ohio, and then when my family migrated south to Charlotte, she carried them to Charlotte. Consequently, I carried them to Chapel Hill, and then my last trip to the border, I carried them to the border to just really ask that question about immigration and how many people in the United States really are immigrants. My family is certainly an immigrant family. It's a different immigration story, but I think it's something we all need to remember, is that almost everybody here is an immigrant.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.